Hi, and welcome to part two of Essential Beliefs. In this study, we're looking at beliefs, laws, mores, customs that are foundational to nations, civilization, as well as the church. We understand that every group of people have to have laws that they live by, live under, in order to maintain the freedom of everyone involved without uh, one person's freedom running over into another person's freedom. What I want us to understand in this study is we have in this country have begun to undermine not so much the beliefs, but the authority for the beliefs. We talked last week in the introduction about Jesus saying, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." I believe our culture still embraces that concept. However, they've removed the authority from it. And the authority of that is that Jesus taught it. The reason we do it is because Jesus said, do that. Now, if you remove Jesus, if you remove God, then it basically becomes a bias or a presupposition or wishful thinking or whatever. But as a nation, we keep thinking that that is part of what we do. As we mentioned last week, many of the groups who are reaching out, seeking help or assistance or things like that, Black Lives Matter, groups like that are appealing to, you need to do this for us, whatever this is. And it really begs the question, why? Now, the assumption is you need to do this because you need to treat others the way you would want them to be treated. Well, that's true if Jesus is authority, and he has been up until very recently in the United States. So those ideas were basically unquestioned. That's why it's called the Golden Rule. And it's universally been accepted in our culture and in much of the world, especially the Christian world. But as you remove God, as you remove Jesus, you also remove the motivation for doing it. Therefore, we can still have the ideals, if you will, but no expectation that someone would actually follow it. In this session, we're going to be looking at another biblical principle, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. And I want you to understand that every nation on earth, every nation in history has had some form of this belief. Now, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, as Jesus quoted the Old Testament teaching, is such a powerful way to say very succinctly the idea that justice is important. What you reap, you'll sow. What you do has consequences that you will have to bear if those consequences are negative. Every culture is built on a foundation of its laws and mores. And if you'll notice beside me, I've got a Jenga game puzzle. And this kind of represents a culture that's made up of all kinds of different laws, mores, things like that. And because of that, it's very strong. In fact, as it sits right here, this can handle about a 3-ton load. You could put 3 tons on this wood and it would be able to handle it. Actually, a little bit more than 3 tons because of the strength that it has, what it's made of, but the way it's stacked, et cetera, et cetera. But we have begun removing parts of it. In fact, last week, bear with me, I don't want to knock it over prematurely. Last week, we looked at undermining the teaching of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Now, again, what gets tricky about this is because we still say it or we still kind of have it in our, we were all raised with this ideal. Even if we didn't go to church, even if you're not a Christian, it's such a cultural thing because our culture is based on Judeo-Christian ethics that we all believe it one way or another. Now, what we've removed is not our ideal of it, it's the reason for it, the authority to expect other people to do it, or the ability to insist to someone, now you really need to treat me the way that you want me to treat you. Well, why should I? Because Jesus said, oh, okay, well, that settles it. So we took that one out. Now, we just reduced the ability of this stack to handle weight. Now, I don't know how much. I didn't do that much research, but I think you understand that it's impaired. Now, you won't notice it if we put a 3-ton weight or a 2.5-ton weight directly and evenly spread it across. You wouldn't notice the loss of this one. Now, obviously, as the game goes, the more of these we remove, the more perilous it becomes. But I want you to understand, even now, with just one of these mores, just one of these teachings of God removed, what happens if we take 3 tons of pressure and place it right here on this edge? Because you see, we've taken out this support, and we're expecting these two timbers to support at least from there on up. But what we've also created is a vacuum in here that if you put torque on this by putting your weight right here, I think you understand that would flip off. Now, what that means is we're ready to handle, even with this out, we can handle a certain amount of loads, etc. But there's certain loads, even now with just one removed, that we can handle. And because of that, we're at risk. We're at a greater risk now for our civilization to be challenged by stressors or crises or things that we don't anticipate. So this is still in our vocabulary, but because we've removed the authority behind it, because God said it, etc., we have no right to expect anyone to live up to it. In fact, I think what you're seeing in culture is fewer and fewer people are living up to it. To the extent that when somebody does treat someone the way they would like to be treated, often it's newsworthy. They're called heroes for doing something, and these people will say, well, it's just something I should have done. But the fact that we make something, the fact that it's on the news shows that we've gotten beyond really expecting that to happen. So this is designed to stand up under its own weight. But as we start moving pieces of the puzzle, it can't even hold its own weight up eventually, much less adding weight to the top. So we've reduced the ability just by removing one block, and we don't notice it. If we had 2 tons sitting on here evenly, we wouldn't notice a difference. So we think we're in good shape. So we can remove that block and everything's the same, unless our stress level, unless the load gets to a certain level, then even now it's going to fail. And I think you understand, possibly from your experience of the game, the more of these that we take out, the more the integrity of not only it being able to stand under its own weight, but be able to handle crises or COVID or anything like that gets reduced. So there are not, and here's the challenge, if we were going to try to figure out what pieces we could take out without doing it damage, it would take a structural engineer. In fact, in many cities in the United States, if you're going to try to remove a wall, and it's a load-bearing wall in your house, you have to get an engineer's approval, because oftentimes the contractor will do what is not in the best interest of the house in order to please the customer. But in order to get a permit, there has to be an engineer that says, now wait a minute, you can't take that much out, or if you do, you're going to have to increase the support of the span. So what I want you to understand, and the alarm I'm trying to sound, is that we have got folks saying, and we do this kind of one by one, you know what, I'm going to do what's best for me. So I'm going to take this out, okay? Someone else comes along and removes the one that we're going to look at today, and that is eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. There's some people saying, I'm not going to uphold justice. I'm going to demand that I don't receive justice. Or as a culture, we start moving into that way, removing justice, and we'll talk about that in a moment, which is so well summed up by that statement, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. So we've taken 2 of them out now. Our tower's still standing. Now, it's a little more, even yet, impaired by how much weight it can hold under, because now we've got all of this weight, rather than being transferred to 3, it's transferred to 2. And the same happens down here. think you also understand, as we talked about before, if we put that stress, if we shift 3 tons of stress to this edge, it'll fail. If we shift 3 tons to this edge, it'll fail because it will torque, because it doesn't have support here and here. And what that means is, if we shift that to this corner, it'll fail even easier because it has 2 axes to fail at. All right. Now, I want you to keep this Jenga game in mind, because we're going to use this from time to time through this series to demonstrate what's going on in our culture as we remove these very important teachings and principles. They're not just principles for the church. They're not just principles for Israel. They're principles for civilization, for any nation that wants to succeed, and certainly any nation that wants to take care of its people. And so the problem with this is there is no one in our culture who is acting as a cultural engineer saying, now wait, you can't remove that unless you replace it with something, or unless you shift, because you're dismantling our culture. Our culture is not going to be able to withstand challenges inside and outside. Remember, in the original game, the tower is supposed to support its own weight. In the original Jenga game, as you take one of these blocks out, you actually stack it back on the top. So you add weight over where you've removed your support, and eventually it'll fall under its own weight. If we had cultural engineers who were saying, wait a minute, if you're going to remove justice in any form, you're going to cause this to fall. If you remove do unto others as you would have them do unto you, you're going to cause this to fall. But what happens as a culture is we're coming after these one at a time. We're not looking at the overall culture. We're looking at, hey, here's a law I don't like. I don't like this law on marijuana use, or I don't like this law on marriage or abortion or whatever. So I'm going to move to have that stricken. But at what cost? How is load then transferred? Because there's nobody looking at it, from that perspective of the cultural consequences to the civilization if we do these things. Now, God understood that. That's why the law that we're looking at today, the truism, the statement of realism, not just law. I think we have a biased view of law, but a statement of reality, that if you do not impose eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, you're going to damage your civilization. And we look at the Old Testament and we see, well, God is really, really fierce there. He was really tough. It wasn't that he was being tough. It's that he was standing up for justice, because God is just. All right, so we've removed 2 blocks. Eye for an eye, and do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And it is changed not only our ability to deal with stressors, weight, but it's how that weight is distributed. It's not just that we've reduced how much weight, but who can handle it? Where? What portions of this civilization can handle a weight shift? All right. What are the essential beliefs is eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth? I think there's a misperception among Christians that Jesus came to undo that law, that he got rid of eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. And we're going to look at the scripture. In fact, let's just go ahead and look at that scripture. Matthew 5:38. You've heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist him who is evil. But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. Whoever shall force you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. Now, when Jesus says but, it sounds like he's saying, that's wrong. We're not going to do that anymore. Or we've decided, no, we've got a new law. No. What he did was, as we're going to see in a moment, what he did was, based upon a new precedent, He's calling us to a higher order that doesn't break the law. What it does is waives our rights. But before we get to that, let's get back to Jesus didn't come to break the law. He came to fulfill it. He didn't negate the law. He just gave it a higher motive, a motive in which our righteousness is greater than that of the Pharisees, because we live by totally different motivation, totally different way of looking at things. We're going to waive our rights because it's Jesus' new way. You see, he waived his rights in order to show mercy to us. So, in Saul's day, it was persecution of Christians, and the Sanhedrin was either lazy or was showing mercy that it had no right to show. And I want to show you that in a moment. And Paul came along and demanded, Sanhedrin, do your job. And your job was, if someone is involved in blasphemy or pursuit, or Jews are in pursuit of another god, they're to be stoned. Paul got letters to go to various places, including Damascus, in order to drag people back who were violating what the Sanhedrin was no longer enforcing. Now, like I say, they were either showing a false sense of mercy or they'd just gotten lazy. Had gotten tired of being hard, tough. And so Saul demanded that they do that and demanded the letters to give him authority to go drag these people back to be tried and then to be executed. They hadn't been doing this in a long time. But Jesus showed a better way, a higher calling. Sometimes people show mercy at the cost of justice. And this is going to end up being a two-part lesson, and we're going to get more next time into the challenge between justice and mercy. But what I want you to understand is justice has never been broken. It's never been removed by God. And in fact, what Jesus was saying, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, if someone pushes you beyond, let them do it. Let them do it. Waive your rights under the law. Live on a higher plane than the law. When Jesus said in Matthew 5, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, this is an abbreviation of the original teaching. You would have to live under a rock or on another planet to not know the meaning. You can walk out anywhere in Fort Gibson. You can ask people on the street, do you know what eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth means? On some level, they will know. It's fundamental to civilization. It is, if you do something wrong, you're going to have to pay for it. If you take out someone's tooth, if you knock out their tooth, you're going to have a tooth knocked out of you. If you cause someone to lose their eye, we're going to take your eye, because justice demands that when there is harm to another person, that's made right as much as is humanly possible. So this is fundamental to civilization. Or if we don't have protection for citizens by the king, by the government, by whoever, you're going to have a revolution, because when people believe that their rights have been run over, inalienable rights given by God, if they believe that those rights have been run over and you as the government or king are not enforcing that justice, they will revolt against you. Isn't that what the Tea Party was all about in Boston? It was a revolt against, you're taxing us, but we don't have any representation. That's not fair. That's not an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. Eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth is an incredible summation of a vitally important concept: justice. Jesus didn't remove eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth because he couldn't. He couldn't be the Son of God. He taught us, not anyone else, and this is important, but his followers, to defer it. Because grace has or will have been extended to us, we extend it to others. That's what he's talking about. If someone wants to take your coat, give them your cloak as well. Give them mercy. Give them beyond what they're asking for. This is not eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. This is a different way, because you've received mercy. You've received Freely you have received, freely give. Justice is not negotiable. I can give up my rights all day long. I can negotiate that with myself. Justice is not a negotiable, subjective concept. Now, it's become that way in the United States because we have conflated our laws with the laws of God upon which they're based. We have conflated our laws on the New Testament concept of mercy and grace. We have conflated that back into our laws, although, as I'm going to show you, no government has the right or the authority to do that. They are not supposed to be, and they're not designed by God to be those who give mercy or grace. That's what Jesus does. That's what God himself does. So justice is not negotiable. It is not subjective. It's not one person gets this sentence and another person gets this sentence. It's straightforward. Justice is demanded by God's nature because he is righteous and just. But Jesus became our justice. You see, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth still stand. The harm that I do to other people has to be brought back to me, except Jesus takes that for me. Jesus, it was his eye for my eye. I pluck out somebody's eye, they pluck out Jesus' eye. That's what he did on the cross. It's his tooth for my tooth. Now, it's still tooth for tooth. It's still eye for an eye, or there's no reason that Jesus died on the cross. It's just mercy, unlimited mercy, and universal mercy, but it's not. It has to be this expiation. It has to be this propitiation where justice is taken out on him rather than on me. But there's still justice, and it's justice aimed toward me, that he jumps between me and the administrator of justice and takes the bullet for me. Still eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. Guys, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's been diverted by Christ. But it's only for those who are in Christ. Only those in Christ can receive that because he's the only propitiation there is for sin and unlawlessness, or lawlessness. The unlawful person, the violator, the only hope he has is Christ. So what happens if those in this life at judgment, they receive justice? What does it look like? Fierce punishment. That's not God being mean. It's God being just, because it's what they chose. Because they knew the consequences of their choices when they made them. So they chose it. He gives them to it. But it's also because they violated. Violation demands justice. What happens to those in this life who are outside of Christ? Justice. Guys, there is no mercy. Now, mercy is a quality we can share. But we often do it subjectively at the cost of justice. Governments, this is very important, governments are not dispensers of mercy and grace. They cannot do that without undermining justice. Now, why do we do that in the United States? Because we have the New Testament blended into our Judeo-Christian laws. We've accepted, as Christendom, we've accepted grace and mercy. But we have forgotten that it only comes from God and it only comes through Christ Jesus. We have forgotten that governments were not set up to do what God does. They were set up to control people who don't do what God does so that there is not anarchy in the world. Justice, and we understand that in this culture. We have a problem with justice because it's biased, and I think everybody would agree this, it's biased against victims and victims' families. Boy, if you watch any true crime or whatever, one of the things that you're going to see is rarely do people feel like the person who murdered their family member or whatever got justice, that they got justice. Because, and you'll hear it over and over, I don't understand why this guy can continue to live when our daughter or my husband or whatever, he stopped my husband from living, Why is he able to continue to live? Well, he's able to live in a prison. Yeah, but he's able to live. You see, that violates the sense of eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. And not just because God said it. I think there is that sense in all of us that there needs to be some form of recompense. And if there's not, someone got away with something. If I can, plead down a deal or whatever, often the victims do not feel that there was justice. And that's where your revolutions come from, etc. It's not that the law was violated. When someone does an injustice, it's not that they're violating the law. It's that they're violating one another or other people. See, that's what law defines is. Here's how you can treat people. Here's how you can't treat people. Now, we understand this on an individual level. We understand, if I back into my neighbor's car, I've got a responsibility to eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. He either gets to back into my car to the same extent, or I need to pay for, or my insurance company pay for the damage that he sustained as a result of my negligence or my anger or whatever. I think we understand that on an individual level. What we don't really understand is how that can happen against a group of people. We don't understand that when it's the state of Oklahoma versus Steve Parker, that it's not the state in terms of the government that's been violated. It's everybody that lives in the state to one extent or another. Like a pebble dropped into a lake, the ramifications of my crime impact people. Now, it's difficult for us to see that relationship, but the more you investigate it, the more you understand that it's there. So we have this. If I break the speed limit, how's that harming anybody else? I don't hit anybody else, etc. And this is where it gets a little bit esoteric, because in breaking the speed limit, not only does it suggest that others can do the same thing, but I'm putting people in danger. In fact, if I'm at the speed limit, which is amazing to me, you can drive to Tulsa on the turnpike at 80 miles an hour. It's just amazing. But if I figure in, hey, they're not going to, the cops are generally not going to stop me for 10 over, so I can go 90. I can push that to 95 or 100 if I'm in a big hurry. Now, what everybody else on the highway doesn't know necessarily is that they're in increased danger until, zoom, I pass by them. And what are they going to say? Well, that nut, that idiot, look at how he's driving. On that level, we understand. But there's folks out on highways all over the place that don't realize that their danger increment has increased just a little bit because we don't know where this guy's going to go that's doing 100 miles an hour. Those kinds of ideas are difficult for us to understand. And I think sometimes as we read through the Old Testament, we have trouble understanding. Why was God such a stickler for that? Because it puts other people at harm, whether or not they can see it. So we fail to see how breaking the speed limit harms anybody. And that's the beginning of what we call these victimless crimes. And there's no such thing. Because ultimately it's ungodliness. It's ungodlikeness. So when it's unlike God, then he judges it. And that's where justice, judgment, they come from the same place. Now, caring people cry for mercy. There's those who cry out for criminal reform, who want mercy for people who've been maybe imprisoned for, maybe they got a what is perceived an unfair sentence, even though it was done totally legally. It was done through the whole legal process. There are those who are crying out for reform on drug sentences. And again, the plea for mercy. Hey, no one was hurt. This person was smoking marijuana in their home. Nobody was hurt by that. Not considering all the implications of that, where I'm buying it, where it's coming from. Do I leave my house when I'm impaired? Am I helping drug lords in Colombia or whatever? We don't think in those terms because we look at the individual. So we look at crimes against the state or against the community as abstract or esoteric. They're victimless crimes. And they seem to be that way from the perspective of the individual. So we look at community as second to our own desires, or we look at it not at all. like I said, we don't have social engineers who are changing these things. There's no overarching engineer to say, you can't do that. You can't remove that one without replacing this or that or whatever. And that's exactly what God does. So the whole mask issue has become personal rights versus shared responsibility. It's, I don't see a need to protect the community. I just want to fulfill my own rights. You see, that's starting from an individual's perspective, and I consider the community either second or not at all. I'm willing for them to take the risk of getting coronavirus from me so that I don't have to wear a mask. That's that plea for mercy. I want mercy because basically I want freedom. All right, but we understand sin has to be atoned for. So does law. But government cannot provide this. Atonement is a reparation for a wrong or an injury. In a religious context, it's a reparation or expiation for sin. Okay, those are parallel concepts: a wrong or an injury, violation of a law, or sin. Expiation is to extinguish the guilt incurred by someone. So we need expiation from our sins, and it's either eye for an eye, or it is mercy. But mercy only comes from God. Government cannot provide atonement. That doesn't mean they don't. It means they can't. And the cost of doing that is a dumbing down of the notion of justice. This is one of the very basic misunderstandings of converging government and faith, is we take mercy from faith and we put it into government. And governments do not have the right, they don't have the justice right to promote mercy, because that only comes from God through Christ. So when our Judeo-Christian heritage intermingles with our laws, then we get this uneasy balance, which is an imbalance of justice and mercy. And that's demonstrated throughout our criminal justice system, in which there are very few people who feel like justice is being meted, because we don't understand what justice is, and we don't understand the cost of it. So, in Romans chapter 13, verse 1, let every person be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God for his purpose. Therefore, he who resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword in vain. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath upon the one who practices evil. They don't give prizes, they practice wrath. Where do you find mercy? Well, we need to look at that as well. But first, I want you to hear from Exodus chapter 21 the full definition here, the full teaching that Jesus gave us a portion of, an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. If men struggle with one another and strike a woman with child so that she has a miscarriage, yet there is no further injury, he shall surely be fined as the woman's husband may demand of him, and he shall pay as the judge decides. But if there is any further injury, then you shall appoint as a penalty life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. Look how total that is. Also, look how personal it is. This is on the body, okay? That there's an eye for an eye. You're going to pay for an eye if you cost someone an eye. You're going to pay with your life if you cost someone a life. Leviticus 24, here's where it's carried out. If a man takes the life of any human being, he shall surely be put to death. Listen to that. If a man takes the life of any human being, he shall surely be put to death. No mercy. And the one who takes the life of an animal shall make it good. Life for life. And if a man injures his neighbor, just as he has done, so it shall be done to him. Fracture for a fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Just as he has injured a man, so it shall be inflicted on him by the government. Thus the one who kills an animal shall make it good, but the one who kills a man shall be put to death. There shall be one standard for you. It shall be for the stranger as well as the native, for I am the Lord your God. Then Moses spoke to the sons of Israel, and they brought the one who had cursed outside the camp and stoned him with stones. In the context of Leviticus 24, there was a person living among them whose mother was an Israelite and father was an Egyptian. And he got into a conflict with someone else and blasphemed God and cursed. And so the question was brought to Moses, what do we do about this? Moses took it to God, and here was the teaching of God. Because he injured the name of God, he was killed. And God said, there's one standard for you. Guys, we don't like this, but that's justice. If a man murders, he's killed, period. One standard. Why? Because I'm the Lord. Now, he's not saying, because that's the way I want it. Because that's what flows from my nature. Now, can someone murder someone and be saved? That's where mercy comes in. That's what comes in through Christ, but the law's still being violated. Deuteronomy 19, a single witness shall not rise up against a man on account of any iniquity or any sin which he has committed. On the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses, a matter shall be confirmed. If a malicious witness rises up against a man to accuse him of wrongdoing, then both the man who had the dispute shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges who will be in office in those days. And the judges shall investigate thoroughly. And if the witness is a false witness, and he has accused his brother falsely, then you shall do to him just as he intended to do to his brother. Eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. This cuts out false witness, cuts out false testimony. Listen to the rest of it. Thus you shall purge the evil from among you, and the rest will hear and be afraid and will never again do such an evil thing among you. If you know you're going to murder someone and you're going to die as a result of that, now as we're going to see next week, you're going to die at the hands of the family. See, they're going to get vengeance. They're going to get justice. Okay, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Now remember, Jesus has changed all this for his believers, for his disciples, but not for anyone else. Okay. And we've blended that back into our legal system, and we've made a mess of it. And the rest will hear and be afraid, and will never do such an evil thing among you. Thus, you shall not show pity. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. He gave the reasons. He's given the justification. He's given the deterrent factor, and he's told them, you've got one stand. There is no difference in this. But that sounds harsh. Justice is harsh, because justice is summed up, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. You do the damage, you do the crime, you do the time. You do the damage, that damage will be done to you, or you can restore what damage that you created, and you will not be held accountable. But justice is demanded. You shall not show pity. Well, where does pity come? Mercy of God through Christ Jesus. That's the only place. Any civilization that strives to continue without eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth will not be sustained. Now, this does not apply just to Israel. This applies to mankind, because all mankind was created by God. All mankind will be judged by God. All mankind is accountable to God. We've removed this one. We've removed this one. Through the rest of this series, we're going to be looking at other ones that we have removed. Guess what's happening? That's exactly the point. Next week, we're going to continue on looking at eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth because it's so incredibly foundational. This is pulling one out of the bottom here when we pull eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. And as a civilization, we cannot continue. Any civilization that departs from that is going to be taken over by another nation or is going to have a revolution because people demand justice. It's just as much a part of our DNA as it is God who created us in his image. More to come. I hope you enjoy this investigation of essential beliefs, not just for you and me as Christians, but as human beings. I'll see you more next time. And in the meantime, I hope you have a great day. And I hope that you're able to spend time with the people that you love the most without a mask. God bless you. I love you. See you soon.